Today, I wanted to talk about pretty much the basis of my entire social media presence and something that I feel like is relevant to any single person who follows me, which is overcoming digital distractions. This includes scrolling, video games, pretty much anything behind a screen that was designed by someone to keep your attention. Because here's the reality: TV shows, video games, scrolling, they're all meant to be forms of entertainment. They're supposed to be fun. They really should be. But any forms of fun and entertainment can start to become a problem if it's taking up the time throughout your day when you should be doing other things. Or I think taking up time that you should be spending, maybe not on work, but just on yourself, spending alone. And I think that's one of the main challenges a lot of young people face is so many of us have so many thoughts and ideas, and I think we're very restricted in our ability to make sense of those things just because instead of actually sitting with them for a while, we're running away to some distraction. And I think this episode is going to be a little different than a lot of people expect. I think a lot of people would expect me to just go into like some of the strategies behind eliminating digital distractions from your life entirely. I don't think that's a human approach. Like, I don't think that's realistic. I still, on the random occasion, will play video games when I feel like I've earned it or when I feel like it works well in my day. I'll enjoy TV shows every now and again, mostly movies, but sometimes TV shows. And every now and again, I find myself scrolling. Like, there is a place where these things can exist in our life. And I think sometimes the balance of the effect those things actually have on us and our interpretation of how much they affect us is actually very different. And what I mean by that is if, say scrolling takes up an hour of your day and you heavily denounce scrolling and the time that you spend scrolling, that hour is going to mean so much more to you and affect you so much more and make you a lot more upset than if it isn't a big deal. Like if you just have this kind of understanding and accepting relationship with it. And there's a fine line with this because obviously if you scroll for 8 hours a day and you have an accepting relationship of that and it still is tracing back to you being upset with how you're spending your time, that's a bit of misalignment there. A bit, it's a lot of misalignment. But I guess in a sense, I'm almost saying like, let the people who have a serious problem with it worry about it. Like if we use alcohol as an example, if you have one drink one night throughout the week, and you're beating yourself up over having that one drink. Or you know what? I think what we see this a lot with is food. Like if you have a dessert one night and you're like crushing yourself because you destroyed your macros and you're going out of line on your diet, or you're really going to regret this and it's going to affect your body negatively over one dessert, like that's just not having realistic expectations. And that's leading to a lot more negative thoughts and emotions than is necessary. It doesn't align with the actual effect of that action. In the same way that like scrolling for a half hour or playing video games every now and again or at like the end of the day, for example, it's not affecting your day all that much. Maybe not as much as you let it. And I want to give you a specific example of what I'm talking about here. Back when I used to play video games so much more than I did, I'm talking like at least 3 hours a day, at least. It was also a really great time for my business. When someone brought my first ever 5-figure deal to me, like multi-5-figure deal in my video agency, someone called me to let me know about it. I was sitting in my underwear playing video games at like 9 in the morning on a weekday, getting a phone call about how I was potentially going to have a 5-figure deal in my agency for some videos that we were going to produce. So clearly, having some amount of digital distraction in your life isn't completely indicative of living a failed lifestyle. And I guess in some ways I should take responsibility for that mindset a little bit because I think I had that mindset back in the day, like when I first started making things online, and I very much took the stance that if you could eliminate them entirely, that would be ideal. But now that I've been doing this for going on a year and I've really started to understand my own relationship with these things and just seeing how my life has blossomed over the past year despite not completely eliminating them from my life, I'm realizing there's more to it at like a personal level beyond just the platforms and the usage itself. There's this idea or kind of philosophy I've really subscribed to lately in all aspects of my life, but particularly with digital distraction, in that the more you denounce it, the more you say, this is bad for me, I don't want to be doing this, the more it is going to affect you when it happens. And I feel like it just, in this day and age, if you're a young person, unless you completely change your life, which is not a realistic expectation or even a healthy one sometimes, unless you do that, the chances that you are going to fall into little pits of distraction throughout the day is it's very likely, because the entire world is on these things as far as social media platforms go. The entire world enjoys watching television. So I think in this case, it's like it's almost that philosophy of, work hard, play harder situation, where if you're working, just focus on the work. Like, this is why I always talk about, if you are distracted, specifically with your phone, I think, put it in another room. Like, turn it off, put it in the bathroom. If you guys know Sean on Instagram, I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name, I'm going to ruin it. But Sean posts a lot of like anti-scrolling videos as well. And I remember a while back he did one on like how kind of gross and obstructive it was to scroll in the bathroom. And he, there's good reason for that. And I'm not, this is no shade towards him, but at the same time, what if you did the opposite? What if you only scrolled in the bathroom? What if that was the only place you used your phone? Imagine like the time you would have throughout the day and how you would spend that time, like how dedicated you would be to what you were doing in that moment versus having this like fragmented work approach. And I love this because it doesn't completely denounce the usage of it. It's just like, I have a time and a literal place where I am going to go be distracted, go enjoy some entertainment for a little bit, but it is capped unless you want to spend 8 hours in your bathroom that day, which I think is unlikely. I don't know, maybe you have a comfortable toilet seat. But seriously, that's what I'm working through in my head at the moment, is like really thinking back on my own story and some of the situations, specifically in my business, like specifically, I think the best gauge of success I have in my life, which in a lot of ways is my video agency. Just that story, like the fact that I got a multi-5-figure deal while sitting in my underwear playing video games, I think is a testament to the fact that simply eliminating distractions from your life does not get you to where you want to be. So I think you're better off, instead of denouncing it entirely, shifting your use of it to something that is more productive and doesn't fragment your creative thought and work, your most valuable assets as a person. And in that, just relieving so much of the tension that you have to perform a certain way, and just instead just be in that moment of working for a little bit. And I know it's hard sometimes when you're conditioned to want to go play video games, like that was my experience, or when you're conditioned to just jump to your phone. You really have to build an environment where you don't do that, at least for the period where you're working. One thing I think that contributes to being able to do this when you're first starting out and you're maybe not able to remove yourself as much from the distraction. Like for me with video games, it was very difficult because they were just on my desktop, easy to install or uninstall as I pleased. And I always had access to them because it was the same system that I worked on. But basically one thing I would do is instead of eliminating video games entirely, I would put on a business related podcast, something related to my goals in the background while I played. And so that way I wasn't like, my mind wasn't completely locked into the game itself. And I was also consuming something that in time, whether it was, weeks or months, would contribute to a better understanding of my business and how to grow it and just how to be more successful in that way. This is actually a pretty common technique, I think, with any distraction, is just to split your attention between the distraction itself and something more productive. I have talked about this in the past with scrolling. Like I find one way to avoid that kind of groggy wake up feeling after scrolling for a half hour is to just, while you're scrolling, every couple reels, just like look up and observe the environment around you for like 2 seconds. I think this keeps you based in a different reality, at least than scrolling, and helps you to avoid the complete detachment from your life. It's the same concept, video games and listening to a podcast. Your brain isn't then completely occupied with like the sound design of the game and getting completely immersed. You are kind of split between that and something a bit more productive. which is a million times better in my opinion than just being locked into a game completely and utterly for 4 hours. One observation I've made about how I spend my time and how I do it more productively is, I feel like the clearer you understand the steps forward in your day, the better, the more likely you are to execute on them. If things are very vague and you're just not sure what you need to do, it's so much easier to just jump to something else to distract you. Because I think in that moment, you kind of feel inadequate. So, even if you're not sure it is the right step forward, like I'll give you a personal example. If there's a day where I wake up and I'm just not sure what I should work on related to my social media, I'll kind of take a look at things I've been lagging on. So like, for example, I've missed a couple weeks of putting out a podcast. So that was one thing I thought about today. I was like, oh, I'm not entirely sure what I'm working on today, but I know, a podcast is something I have failed to produce over the past couple of weeks. So maybe I should put a little bit of time towards that. Same thing with my newsletter. Like I just did a newsletter campaign, but I hadn't put out a newsletter in a while. So I'll probably go work on that for a little bit. And so pair that kind of more direct, actionable plan with removing distractions from your environment. I was very set up for success this morning because actually both my phones were dead when I woke up. I have two phones. One of them has social media on it. The other does not. But nonetheless, both of them were dead. And I think they're still in my bathroom at the moment. But I haven't touched them all morning. And here I am at 10 a.m. actually making a podcast for the first time in several weeks. So I think this is a very active testament to how well this can work. And I've brought this study up before, but I want to bring it up again because it's just crazy. But just having a phone in your pocket, even if it's dead, will result in you being more distracted during work. And they did this test with students and reflected it on exam scores and found a kid whose knowledge and education hadn't changed by simply having technology in their pocket ended up performing worse on a test because they weren't able to think or focus completely straight. And the reason I like to bring this up so much is because I feel like that's the most common DM I get all the time is like, okay, I know we have this problem. How do I deal with it? This is how. Remove it from your environment. Put it away. Turn it off. Put it in the bathroom. If you need to physically get up and go use your phone for whatever reason, that is more than acceptable. But don't bring it back to your chair in where you're working. That's the death sentence, really. I think when when you are insistent on having your phone in your pocket or in your area, even worse, face up right in front of you when you're trying to work. Why would you do that? That is the worst thing you could do. I find it's even better if it's like, if you can physically not see it, like even if you walk into the room where it is and it's like sitting under a blanket or something, just your brain not visualizing it makes it so much easier to not touch. And is it kind of silly to go to this measure to hide it? Maybe, but is it kind of silly how addicted we are to it? Yeah. So why not give it a try? Anyway, that's all I have for this week. I was just thinking about this morning and it really kind of sparked my interest and reflecting on my past a little bit and seeing what really got me here and like honestly what a good relationship with technology looks like. And I think this episode kind of encapsulates what that could look like. Enjoy the week. Put your phone in the bathroom. I'll see you next time.